Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. You have joined the Clough Expert Series podcast number 8. I've got a very special guest to introduce to you today. My name is Jillian Formentin and I am the Director for Engineering, Energy and Resources at Clough in Perth, Western Australia. So for our newer listeners, Clough is part of the Webuild global group of companies. So this podcast episode aims to communicate some key information regarding digital transition in the engineering construction industry and bring expanded knowledge and curiosity even to some of these important technical issues facing our industry. So our special guest today, his name is Neal Currigan and he is a senior project engineer with Clough and has been with Clough for around about 4 years now. He's chartered in Mechatronics and construction and he's become a very, very valuable person, and particularly because of his ability to organise and display information and help us make better decisions at Clough in the leadership of our projects. He bridges the gap between understanding the EPC life cycle, so the engineering, procurement, construction life cycle, and also gets his hands on the data that supports that. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our expert series today, Neal. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Maybe just start a bit by telling me a little bit about your background, Neal, just to kind of tell us a bit about who you are.
Yeah, thanks very much for that introduction, Jillian. So I originally studied Mechatronics engineering at UWA. I graduated in 2006. In the second half of the degree, I was predominantly working with autonomous mobile robotics. And obviously that's quite a contrast to what we do here at Clough. There were a few opportunities in that space back then though, so I ended up falling into a mechanical piping role at the Wesfarmers gas plant in Kwinana. After a few years with Wesfarmers, I continued on the client side, working as a project engineer for BHP and Rio Tinto. Then in 2013, I transitioned to the contractor side, and I've worked in numerous roles in mining, oil and gas, mineral processing and water infrastructure. Then in 2019, a colleague contacted me regarding a potential opportunity with Clough on the construction of BHP's new ore handling plant for the South Flank project, and which obviously I gladly accepted that.
Right, excellent. Thank you so much, Neal. And project engineers and senior project engineers at Clough all have quite different roles, and it sounds like you've had quite a number of different things you've been already able to contribute. All right, well, I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the challenges faced on that particular project. Maybe talk a bit about that.
Yes, on that project, we encountered a variety of problems with management of large data sets, I guess you could say. And I was able to develop some ad hoc solutions using my background in programming. And, this is sort of a skill and passion that's often gone dormant, I guess, for long periods of time throughout my career. Fortunately, the team that I was working with saw the huge potential of that, not just on the project, but elsewhere at Clough as well. And, really this is one of the main reasons that I enjoy working here. Your contributions are recognised. And I guess it's a message to, the younger engineers in the business, or perhaps someone that's, considering a career at Clough, by showing some initiative in an area of interest, it is possible to tailor your position such that both you and the company benefit.
Right, now thanks for saying that. It's one of the things I'm most proud of too, Neal, is innovation is something that we really encourage, and that it's been recognised in you is really, really great. So maybe let's talk a little bit now about some of the direction your role's taken since then, because you've got some really great ideas about the future and your contribution.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So towards the end of that project, I branched into the application known as Power BI, and realistically that was a natural progression of all of that data and systems work that I've been doing on that project. Since then, I've developed a number of solutions for various functions and projects, and as you sort of touched on in the introduction, just working towards establishing myself as someone who bridges that gap between understanding the EPC life cycle, but also wanting to get hands-on with the data that supports it.
Yeah, very good. All right, so a little bit of a jump into something that's certainly very important to Clough is advanced work packaging. So would you tell us a little bit about what is advanced work packaging and maybe some of the confusion that's around it, maybe clear some of that up for us?
So I think, as you said, there definitely, I think, is at times, speaking to people, some element of confusion about what advanced work packaging or AWP actually is. Work packaging in itself is certainly nothing new. It's been around for many decades, and that's really just the concept of bundling up work scopes into manageable portions of a given size. Then the word advanced is used to signify the bolstering of this process to account for the complexities of the modern construction environment. There's also a set of guidelines that have been developed by researchers in Canada, and these capture the best practices and recommendations around that process. It sounds simple enough, however, the roadmap to AWP implementation does typically represent an enormous paradigm shift for a company and really requires close involvement from all business functions.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the beauty of it. It does bring those functions together for the better outcomes for the project. But what would you say it means to have successfully implemented advanced work packaging, and what would that look like?
Yeah, so I think a successful AWP implementation will definitely look different for different companies. If we think about the core aim of AWP, it's about improving the efficiency at the very coal face of construction. So what can happen during construction is that we start working in an area, but then at some point something will go wrong, right? We'll discover missing materials, perhaps some defects are identified in something that we're trying to install, and of course any number of things can go wrong. So obviously that work front needs to be put on hold whilst that issue is resolved. So whilst that's happening, we might relocate that crew to a different work front and then start work again there. However, there's a great deal of time and effort that goes into firstly making that area safe to work in, plus having all of your materials, tools, plant and equipment ready. So obviously, the more frequently that type of issue arises over a long period of time, the greater the impact of the project. So AWP seeks to minimise these disruptions, ultimately by striving to adhere to one fundamental rule, and that is basically that we only start a work front or work pack when it is 100% unconstrained. And I say striving to adhere because it is very difficult to actually adhere to that. In terms of what I mean by unconstrained, everything that we need to complete the work from start to finish is available to us. So first, of course, the design needs to be complete, all the materials ready, personnel resources, plant and equipment, tooling, temporary works if need be, scaffolding permits, everything that you can imagine. So again, the concept sounds simple enough, but there's just so many moving parts in project delivery. So things don't always go to plan.
Yeah, it's. Anyone who's listening who's had any part of project delivery would have, I'm sure, had periods of time where it's been straight out chaos. So it can sound a little bit like utopia, having like a really well implemented and operating advanced work packaging. Let me share us a little bit. I think it does take a particular kind of person, Neal, to have so much interest in this. It's certainly incredibly valuable when it all works. But maybe share a bit about why is this of so much interest to you, particularly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's multiple components of AWP implementation. The part that really interests me is the information management aspect of it, and basically this starts with the idea that everyone on the project or everyone in the business is reliant on information or data, of course, that is generated by other people. So when the systems that we use to generate or store that information aren't fit for purpose, aren't sophisticated enough, aren't integrated with our other systems, or perhaps don't even exist, then that can just lead to enormous inefficiencies in the way that we do business and ultimately leading to a lack of visibility at all levels.
Yeah, very good. And it's something that you and I have talked about a lot is quality of data, and the importance. There's certainly many occasions that I think, well, certainly both of us, but anyone listening to this podcast would have been at the effect of information either poorly captured or poorly represented. Could you talk a little bit about how important the data is and how important it is to have that at your fingertips?
Yeah, sure. So, I think everyone would know that the average company these days uses a staggering number of applications in day-to-day business, right? And obviously not all of these are necessarily generating data that we need to store. Most of them are in some shape or form. So we come back to this concept of everyone needing data generated by someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Having lots of applications can become a problem if they aren't integrated. In other words, they don't speak to one another. So that's where solutions such as data warehousing and data lakes comes into play. And look, I certainly don't claim to be an expert on these, but I am a big advocate for their importance. In essence, each application pushes or transfers the current state of its own database to a central cloud-based location at some predetermined frequency. Once there, we can manipulate it and create relationships between data sources using primary keys. The data warehouse can then act as an intermediary between different applications, or perhaps the primary source of truth upon which we develop our reports, our metrics, and other solutions to support our projects and the company at large. The other huge benefit of this type of large-scale data storage is we can not only store the current state of our data, but also the previous state, say once per day over a long period of time, allowing us to build up a historical record of the progression of the company.
Very good. Maybe if you could expand on it a bit, could you give us some practical examples of what you mean by primary keys and how that would work at Clough or EPC companies?
Yeah, for sure. So a good example of a primary key for a company like Clough is something like a project number. Think about the insights that we can provide from this one very high-level number. We can filter our personnel databases for who's allocated on the project or deployed. We can filter our material databases for materials that have been ordered or received, and of course safety databases for safety performance, and of course that list goes on and on. At a project level, probably the most important primary key is the workpack number, or as we call it, the field installation workpack number, or in a similar sense, the activity ID in the schedule that relates to that workpack. So when those workpack numbers are defined at the very inception of the project, and then we carry that through every step of the project lifecycle, but more importantly, associating it as a piece of metadata against absolutely everything that we're doing, documents and drawings that we're generating, suddenly we have a much clearer picture of the health of our projects and ultimately our readiness to execute a discrete portion of work on site. Again, it sort of sounds a simple enough concept, but the key problem is that things invariably change throughout the project, right? So if the systems and processes that you're using to manage this metadata don't facilitate automated change, then that burden of effort becomes too great very quickly, and the whole process can just fall in a heap. So, and all of this comes back to the central idea of AWP, starting with the end in mind.
Very good. All right, so what would you say some of the benefits of improved system integration are? It kind of goes without saying, but I'd like you to kind of say a bit about what you see some of those benefits are.
For sure. So we sort of if we go through, the life cycle of something like a simple valve or a pump or instrument, right? From its very first inception, during tender phase, its function and purpose are defined. We allocated a tag number, and it'll likely go into an equipment list. At some point during design, for example, it'll be drawn onto a PID, it'll be modelled, it'll go onto a data sheet and a bill of materials, and we'll conduct things like HAZOPs and other safety studies to further define its behaviour in the overall process. Eventually it'll find its way to the supply chain, it'll be sent for quotation, those quotes are received and evaluated and POs placed, and then fabrication's underway. and we're tracking that verification process. NDT may be conducted, it's painted, inspections occur, and finally it's dispatched, and then we track that delivery. And then it'll find its way to site and probably sit on a pallet, wrapped in plastic for a period of time, and then hopefully another inspection will occur to make sure that everything's okay. And then finally it's issued from stores to field and it's installed. And all of that without even getting into things like completions, commissioning, and operational readiness. So, as I said, there's a huge amount of data that we're constantly tracking throughout the life cycle of these. As I said, things as simple as just a single valve. Now, imagine having full visibility over that life cycle at any stage of the project. So not only being able to see what stage it's at and what it's been through, but also what is still left to go. And better yet, not having to log into a multitude of systems for this bit of information, or search SharePoint for another piece, or perhaps email someone for another. So with a sufficiently sophisticated application to manage all of that underlying data, this is the kind of visibility that you could achieve through that full integration of your systems.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, and it's just the frustrations that are often experienced in the midst of a construction project are all the kinds of things you're saying, like the integration, having all that data available at the right time, the people can just get on with the job.
It's just so critical, isn't it? But it's something that it's very hard to get right. Absolutely.
Yeah, so earlier today I was having a conversation about the elements of psychological safety. You know, there's a lot talked about at the moment, like people feeling safe and able to speak up and able to do their work well. I can hear what you're describing here. Removing frustrations could actually impact some of those important issues as well beyond the successful completion of a project, but people's experience of being able to be part of a project like that would be hugely enhanced.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a much more fulfilling experience, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Use words like satisfaction and even joy would be fantastic. This is a little bit of it's not really a stretch away from what we're talking about, but I'd like us to have a bit of a chat about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I know there's a difference between the two. I'm certainly not an expert about these, and I don't know whether you would call yourself an expert. You certainly are compared to I am. What could you share with us about artificial intelligence, and how does it fit in with some of what we're talking about here today?
For sure. So, AI and machine learning, or ML, have they've really gone through such a rapid period of growth over the past decade, and in the past few years, in particular, it feels like just about everywhere you look, there's some new novel application this type of technology, and we're starting to see various applications of this now in the construction and project information management space. So for anyone listening that perhaps isn't quite as familiar with what these terms are, so AI is simply it's where a computer is able to complete tasks that would normally require human intelligence and discernment. And then machine learning is a branch of AI where a computer can learn how to complete a predefined task without us having to explicitly program every aspect of that task.
Okay, very good. All right, so why do you think artificial intelligence and machine learning have seen such rapid growth recently?
It's a very good question, and there's multiple reasons why AI and ML become so prevalent. The obvious ones are things like increases in processing speed, improvements in data storage, as well as just the availability of data. In other words, we're generating more data than ever before, with such as the Internet of Things, for example. One of the other critical reasons is that these technologies are now more accessible than ever for someone that's wanting to branch out into this area or conduct research. So in that regard, last year I undertook a machine learning research project into the feasibility of using project-related data for predicting the likelihood of a safety incident occurring during construction. So during construction, we have a wealth of data that's constantly being generated. For example, we have our roster and manning data, so we know how many people and what role types are currently on site. We have our work-based planning data, we usually know how many work fronts are planned to be open on a given day, and the typical risks associated with those activities. Of course, we have our climate forecasts, so a whole range of temperature, wind, humidity and precipitation data given to us free of charge. And then of course we have our HSSE KPI data, so all our safety interactions, inspections and audits and observations that we're constantly carrying out on site. And the critical feature of everything that I just mentioned is that we can forecast ahead of time with some degree of certainty what it will be on a given day. So then in terms of machine learning algorithms, we can start by examining this data retrospectively and see if a relationship exists between that data and, as I said, for example, the occurrence of safety incidents. So to explain that a bit further, firstly, we train the machine learning model by presenting it with both the features and the outcome of the data set. So the data features, what I mean by that is, for example, on this day we completed X number of KPIs, we had X number of people on site of these role types, let's say it was 41 degrees, we had 2 millimetre of rainfall, we had X work fronts open, and let's say, hypothetically, we had an incident on that day. So we feed all of that data into a neural network, and then the algorithm iterates over every day of data and attempts to establish a relationship to that outcome. We then apply the model that it creates to unseen data. So in other words, it knows the features but not the outcome, and from that we can get a sense of how accurate it is. So for the case study that I was using on real-world project data, the machine learning model demonstrated a incident prediction accuracy of upwards of 80%, which is obviously a very promising result.
It is, and it's extraordinary, actually. And I think, particularly in an industry which is full of very, very practical, world-weary men and women, the application of data for something that's so important to all of us is just quite amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really good. So 80% accuracy for being able to predict injuries on a project site.
Yeah, it's a small data set, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. Yeah.
It's extraordinary. All right, well, what do you think the direction is, like, of AI and machine learning at Clough? What do you see would be a smart future for us, and how would we begin to go about that?
Okay. So, I think for any business that's looking to benefit from AI and ML, really the first step is to develop a strategy for how they intend to integrate these technologies into their business. The starting point of this will include simply definition of how a proposed technology will actually align and support business objectives. From there, it's about establishing a sort of criteria for evaluating new AI technologies and providers, as well as how a solution will actually be monitored and evaluated after it's deployed. I think whether a business is looking to apply machine learning holistically or just in isolated use cases, really a separate project needs to be run in parallel, covering all that data gathering, standardization, integration and centralization that I've spoken about today. Not having both a large amount of data that is also accurate and reliable can definitely be a limiting factor in many machine learning applications.
Yeah, very good. Given your role as a project engineer, and you've worked amongst a whole bunch of different things and different projects, what do you think are some of the actual real world limitations we're going to experience when we're moving towards this kind of thing? What do you think is going to get in the way of us being able to realise some of this huge future that you've shared so well? I'm really interested in what you think, because this is brilliant. We should start doing this right now.
Yeah.
What is what do you think is practically going to get in our way of being able to dive into this tomorrow morning?
I think there's definitely an element of cultural limitations and in our approach to data and to data quality that we really need to address and standardise our approach.
No, that's perfect, right? I wonder too, how much do you think people need to understand about it? Because you think about the different kind of players that there are in any project or any company, right? You've got people with all sorts of different experiences. They're not all going to have an understanding of artificial intelligence, machine learning, even advanced work packaging. They might understand the benefits that they want, but they're not going to understand how to make it happen. How do you reckon we would even start going about that? How would we get this underway?
Yeah, it's a good question. First it's about looking at providers of these technologies, right? Because the first thing that we might sort of approach probably isn't necessarily an in-house development. It's probably going to be looking at these existing software providers that may be already in our existing suite of applications, seeing what they're doing, and what perhaps add-on features they have in the AI space, and looking at whether that we can benefit from that additional functionality. So it's probably going to be sort of a case of multiple functions looking into this in themselves, but it obviously all needs to be also tied back to a central kind of strategy, I guess. I think it really requires a strong advocate or champion from each of these functions that also has an inherent sort of interest and passion to look at implementing these kind of solutions.
Yeah, very good. No, I love that because it is a data issue, and it's a project issue, and it's a planning issue, and all of those sorts of things. But fundamentally, this is a human issue. So it's people working together and using perhaps enhanced tools, but in a way that people are able to align on outcomes and work together, maybe even in better ways.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Neal, thank you so much for this. I mean, it's really mind-boggling, and I'm really excited about the kinds of things we'll be able to implement here that can enable the kind of thinking that you've talked about today, harness some of the technology that's becoming more and more available, and apply it to this industry that we care so much about and can see the benefits. So I really, really appreciate your time today.
Thanks very much, Jillian.
You're welcome. So you've been listening to the session 8 of the Clough Expert Series podcast, and Neal Currigan, a senior project engineer who has a very special interest and skill set in data management and our ability to apply new thinking to some very old practices. So thank you very much.